Hi everyone, welcome. Out here on my bench I've got a pair of African nightcrawler worm bins that are due for a feeding. The systems are now 106 days old, and the last check-in 12 days ago they were still 6 days away from reaching 100 days in service, so I'm not even sure if we even made mention of the upcoming milestone age of 100 days in service. So in case we haven't mentioned it yet, happy 100 days in service to these African nightcrawler systems. Little something we've been doing in these, which has been getting repeated over the past few check-ins, couple check-ins at least, was this application of bedding material out on the top surface. A little deviation from what I usually use as sort of a top dressing on my systems. Usually I use leafy matter, like what I keep in this brown box. But this was already the final batch of the previous seasons or last year's autumn leaves that I had been using all year. And since it was the last of the leaf supply, I kind of automatically turned into a little bit of a hoarder with that stuff, and it's for that reason we transitioned a little bit from using leafy matter as top coverings to my shredded paper cardboard mix. And like we've done during the past few check-ins, we've just been blending this material into the bed. So I figured let's do the same. The last feeding we got was indicated with these coffee filters. So these coffee filters down the middle were showing where we last fed. And that last feeding had a very good bit of weight to it. It was like a heavy portion. And I think the main reason was because it was mainly very moisture laden. It was a whole bunch of peppers, stuff that was frozen, so that as that stuff thawed out, I imagine it probably expelled a lot of its moisture content down into the system, or systems. So I'm not too concerned with moisture in these systems. All of my systems are well protected from drying out due to evaporation with those plastic coverings. In this case, you saw we had bubble wrap top coverings. In other systems, I just take a plastic bag and drape that out across the top surface. But here with the bubble wrap, I think the bubble wrap's a pretty good top covering to use in worm bins. I kind of like the way when you put the bubbles facing down, you have these little air pockets in between the bubbles. So even though you're sort of trapping the system's moisture down beneath the plastic, it still seems to me like there's an opportunity for the bin to breathe, you know, with the air coming in between the bubbles. So I figured before we get started, I would do my best to blend in as much of this top dressing of leaf shredded paper cardboard into the material. And today we'll get back to using leaves, because I've already started into the collection of leaves outside, and I've even set aside a few leaf bags full of this stuff for use in future worm bin feeding, so I no longer have this sense that I have to hoard. Alright, so now let's dig down into where we last fed. The stuff we're giving them today is an assortment of a few things. I've got a few slices of bread that are soaking to make this stuff a little bit more likely to get approached by the worms and consumed. In the past, I've just taken bread and thrown it into the system, and the stuff starts to develop mold, and it seems like when you come back, it's almost all still there, with the exception of what little bit might have gotten broken down by the mold. So I've gotten into the habit of attempting to dampen bread and other baked goods when I put them into the worm bins. Because in a way, if you think about it, this stuff almost acts like a sponge. It's going to suck moisture into itself if it's not damp already. And I'd really rather put stuff into the worm bins that are already at a moisture level that's very similar to the surrounding materials, so as to not cause this stuff to begin drawing moisture into itself from the surrounding materials. I must say, everywhere I've probed through the system, the moisture level has seemed quite nice, you know. And you know, that last feeding 12 days ago was feeding number 8, and today the 9th feeding is going to include, as I mentioned earlier, a few slices of bread. So here you can even see how they're resting in a little bath of water. You can even see a little bit of mold beginning to catch on. And the main course is what you see here. There's some plum and there's some white pumpkin. You know what, I was a little surprised when I was hacking up this white pumpkin at the stringy texture of what's inside. So believe it or not, this pumpkin dates back to not last Halloween, but the Halloween before. So that pumpkin was probably picked over 2 years ago. And it was just a few days ago that I noticed that it was beginning to show signs of decay. I would always come in on a fairly regular basis and check out how it's doing, and it finally started breaking down. It was really a long time coming too. I really thought that it would have started into that process a long time ago, but it somehow managed to survive 2 full years. So I'm starting to find some signs of the last feeding. Over here I only found these thin skins of I believe it's pepper, because we did give them a good bit of pepper last time. Yeah, that's what this is going to be. And we've even got some of these corn cob spheres, which were placed into these 2 systems quite some time ago. At one point I was attempting to help break down more quickly by putting them into my little personal juice blender, and most of the stuff got shredded into this nice fine consistency, but a few of the chunks just spun around and around within the blender, refusing to get broken up. And what I ended up with was a little collection of what I refer to as corn cob spheres. And I did quickly watch the video from last time. I do remember us locating 3 of them over here in this system, and I believe that only 1 was found over in bin number 1. But over here in bin number 2, I just actually bumped into a 3rd piece of corn, 4th piece of corn cob sphere. So we've got a good bit of corn cob remaining over here. I mean, I'll admit it's probably safe to say that they're probably still rolling around somewhere over there in bin number 1, and we were just unable to locate them. So maybe at some point in the near future we will begin bumping into them. I mean, here, look, number 5. So even now we've found almost twice as many of them on this go around as we did last time. This is a piece of corn cob as well, and I don't know if it started out as a sphere, but at this point, if it's not a sphere, I'm going to break it up. In fact, I think I'm just going to start breaking up even the spheres at some point. There's just like an unusual little weird material, which I, for the longest time, had just sitting around. And eventually they started showing signs of mold and decay, and it seemed like it was time to feed them to the worms. So now we blended in a good bit of bedding, and you know, I feel like I probably should run over to the supply of napkins that I've got, because I've got all these napkins that I'd really like to do away with, but I don't have them handy. You know what? I'll take a quick pause, run over to where I've got my collection of that stuff, so we can include that in today's feeding. Well, I grabbed 6 of them. Whether we use them all, I don't know, because these napkins are quite huge. Last time I was at my mom's house for family dinner, I was handed a whole bunch of these after the table got cleared and all the dishes went into the dishwasher. The napkins were handed off to me for composting purposes. So when I do this, I usually try to do so in a way that there's limited amounts of material folded over onto itself, because when I have material that's sort of folded over on itself, it feels like it doesn't have quite as good of an opportunity to break down as if it's not folded over onto itself. It's got a little bit of moisture over here. Perhaps we can make use of that in a way to further dampen things that are going in here dry, such as these napkins. And I guess we could start coming in with some of this delicious food. I'm just going to do it in little layers so that we can give ourselves opportunities to include even more napkins, which from the worm's point of view is just bedding material. Oh, how do you like that? I think I know whose napkin that was. It's funny that you can identify a napkin based on the way it was used. And in this particular case, it was used to help apply makeup. I asked my mom, I said, whose is this? Because besides family dinners, my mom also likes to have her ladies' night dinners, which oddly enough I get invited to as well. And one of her girlfriends, I believe, is the contributor of the napkins that have a little bit of lipstick on them. Hopefully the worms appreciate the lipstick. I'm not sure if it's an edible material, but I'm sure it's harmless. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a good idea for people to be smearing it all over their mouths and quite possibly ingesting some of it. So I think we've pretty fairly divvied out the plum bits and the pumpkin bits. And before we cover up the foods, I'm sprinkling a little bit of grit over here to aid in the digestion of the foods that the worms have been given. And you know what? I've still got 2 more napkins. So you know what? It's almost like setting up a lasagna bin, right? Except instead of cardboard, we're using napkins. And hopefully we're not introducing too much dry material. Somehow I don't sense that that's the case here, so I'm not worried too much about it. Luckily the moisture level in these systems feels quite nice. But just to play it safe and just to give myself a place to put this extra water, I'm dropping it onto the napkins. So let's not forget we've got some leftover bits here too, and here all these corncob spheres. Maybe in the next check-in we should go on a little expedition to see if we can unearth some of the corncob spheres that I know are probably still floating. Well, I don't know, but I'm pretty sure are probably still floating around over here in bin number 1. But they've been eluding us for some reason. Whatever. It's not that important. I just figured if we can account for some of it, then what the heck. Sometimes it's just interesting to keep tabs on certain things, and guess what? I just found one right there. Oh, and another one. Alright, so I guess, you know, there's something about this one, just the shape of it, it doesn't feel quite as spherical as all the others. So it makes me wonder whether it's even whether or not it's even a one of my corn cob spheres or just a chunk of corn cob that would, I guess, based on my new approach with corn cobs, it would probably be fair game for being crushed. That's kind of what I've been doing anymore. I guess with the exception of a few pieces of corn cob that are kind of undergoing a little bit of an experiment to see how quickly they break down because of the way they were prepped before being fed. They were soaked for the longest time. Those corn cobs I've been allowing to just break down at their own natural pace. And then these corn cobs that were just interesting because they were spherical in shape, I've been allowing these to break down at their own pace without help. But pretty much everywhere else, my new thing with corn cobs has been to kind of break them apart when I encounter them and see if I can help with the breakdown process. Because corn cobs do take forever, so every little bit of help is probably a good thing to help drive them towards the finish line. So here we go, putting in a little bit of last year's leaves. And once again, I can feel myself doing the hoarding thing by being careful not to dump it all out, but you know what? It feels to me like I've got to break my old habits and try new things, you know. I've also got a new box, 2 new boxes, same exact box. So this box that we've been using for years, I believe, is now going to be retired as well. I'll just peel off the tape and it too will get composted. That seems like the good way to play it. And then next time you see me using leaves, it's going to be leaves from this year's leaf collection. And they'll even be stored in a nice new box. How do you like that? kind of nice to know that the old stuff has a place to go, a responsible place to go. And it's also kind of nice to know that there's replenishments coming once certain things have been depleted, so that I can avoid my unusual habit of hoarding. And you know what? I almost forgot. I did allocate a couple coffee filters to serve as replacement feeding zone indicators in these systems. So before we call it a day, let's go ahead and deploy those as well. I wonder if they'll get chewed up the way the previous ones did. They probably will. It might take some time, but that's okay. I've got more to replenish those as well in inventory. So that's it for the check-in, everyone, with the now 106-day-old African nightcrawler systems receiving feeding number 9 after a 12-day pause. And hopefully they appreciate the nice plentiful amount of bedding they've been getting lately. It does seem like an environment that the worms are probably enjoying. I didn't look closely. I can't tell if they were smiling, but in a way I believe they probably are. Alright everyone, that's it for the video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's very much appreciated as well. Alright everyone, have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye now.